and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast, where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, Lauren. And I'm joined today by Brian Davis, a real estate investor and personal finance writer. After graduating from the University of Delaware in 2003 with two useless bachelor's degrees and an even more useless minor in anthropology, he fell headfirst into real estate and finance by accident. He promptly went on a property buying spree from 2005 to 2008. It was what you might call a learning experience, and all of the lessons were expensive. Today, eventually, Brian tired of landlording and unloaded his own portfolio of rental properties. Nowadays, he only invests passively in real estate. Along with his wife and daughter, Brian spends most of the year abroad living by his own rules. He loves writing, hiking, cooking, pairing wine with said cooking, scuba diving, and occasionally surfing badly. Most of all, Brian loves showing others how they too can create their ideal lives through real estate investing and lifestyle design. Thanks for joining me, Brian.
Lauren, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, our goal for today is make adulting easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a big part of adulting. So, today, as we can probably tell from your bio there, we're going to talk about lifestyle design and real estate.
That sounds great. That's right up my alley.
Okay, so we heard about useless college degrees. I want to know if that's how you specifically feel about those degrees, or are we past that? Should nobody get degrees nowadays?
No, I say useless college degrees tongue in cheek. College is a rewarding experience in and of itself. Now, is it worth $90,000 a year like some private colleges cost? I would argue no. uh, but I do think that a college degree is inherently valuable, both from just a personal experience level and also it does create much higher lifelong earnings. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like the average lifetime earnings for someone with a college degree, a bachelor's degree, is over $1 million
Yeah.
more than someone with only a high school diploma.
Yeah, I think
So
that's right.
yeah, I mean, even in today's world, there is a real monetary reward, or a monetary return on investment for attending college. I do think that people need to be mindful about how much they're spending on their degree, where they go, how they pay for that degree. Is it with loans? Is it with a combination of scholarships and grants and working while you're in school, all that stuff. I mean, I went to a public university. I got a scholarship to pay for some of that. So I graduated with no student debt. My parents did help me out some, but my net costs to attend college were quite low.
Me
So
too.
um, yeah, so I say use this tongue in cheek. I do think that people need to pay attention to the cost and the return on investment, but it's all useful, even if you have a psychology degree and a criminal justice degree like I do.
Interesting. I was going to ask what they were. College is like, to me, it's life with training wheels. And so I think that's kind of a nice, at least here in the United States. I know it's different elsewhere, but we mostly are not like working full time. We don't usually have families. We're usually 18 to 22 years old. A lot of people have some help from family and things. And so generally you're kind of like focused on school and you don't have a lot else going on, and you get to kind of play being an adult. You go to the grocery store, you're doing your cooking, you're doing all those things for the first time. And I'm watching my sister go through that now because she's 21, so she's in college right now. Okay, good. So we covered that. I tend to agree with you basically on every single front there. If you're going to get an expensive degree, like, just go into that with eyes wide open, which a lot of people I think are starting to, because I think the millennials definitely with their student loans probably paved the way for people to think a little more before they make those decisions blindly.
Yeah, and there was actually data out last week that um, the net cost, the real cost of college tuition and fees has actually gone down over the last decade, contrary to the prevailing narrative. Now they are adjusting for inflation, and obviously inflation was quite
Right.
bad for a couple of years there, but still, I thought that was promising. The market is responding. Colleges are
Yes.
responding to the pushback and the withdrawal of demand. So
Well, just logically, college for a long time has been the costs have been raising at a faster rate than the rate of inflation, and you
way higher,
literally
way
can't do
faster.
that forever, or it will literally go to infinity, and it
Right.
can't, right? So I'm hoping healthcare will follow suit in this country.
Well, knock on wood.
That's another topic for another day. Okay, so this is fascinating. I've always wanted to talk to somebody or have somebody on here to talk a little bit about pre-great financial crisis and who have persisted through it and stayed at least to some extent in the real estate game after. I sort of assume, and I could be wrong. I mean, I think you and I are maybe you're a little older, maybe we're about the same age, but I was basically it was the week I turned 19 that Lehman Brothers crashed. And so I was kind of young to have been caught up in any of this, right? But so you said you bought a bunch of properties in 2005 to 2008. For anyone who doesn't know, 2008 was basically this huge real estate bubble actually burst. A lot of people, because of that, keep thinking we're going to see that again. But really, there were so many different conditions that made it right for this bubble, not only to form, but also to pop. But can you talk a little bit more about like that time and that whole experience?
Yeah, so I graduated college without knowing what I wanted to do with my life, like many of us. And I got a job offer to work with a guy who was a friend of my stepdad's, basically. My approach was to just go around and talk to as many of my parents' friends as possible and just try to get a sense for what people do, in their normal day-to-day work.
A
Because
good idea.
when you grow, well, you grow up and you know of like 5 jobs total, right? Like
Sure. Yeah. Good.
police
Like
officer,
teachers, doctors, because like the people you interact with, right? Maybe
yeah,
what your parents
firefighter,
do. Yeah,
astronaut.
exactly. Totally.
Like,
Totally.
yeah,
Whatever's in the little like kit that you buy or like whatever Barbies there are. Yeah, totally.
yeah, exactly. So, but whereas most people work in fields that are totally unrelated to any of that stuff.
Hmm.
So, you graduate college, you just don't know what, these all these different jobs are out there, what even exists as a possibility. And, new careers are being created all the time. Stuff that wasn't around 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. So anyway, so I fell into work for a hard money lender. And for anyone who's not familiar with that term, these are lenders who specialize in purchase rehab loans for house flippers or people who buy a fixer upper, renovate it, and then refinance to keep it as a rental property. So these are real estate investor loans. So I'm working with real estate investors, and I'm watching these investors just make money hand over fist in the mid aughts. Because it was a big party in the industry at the time, and everybody's making money
Epic.
no matter what.
Epic. Yep.
Yeah, real estate's just an elevator that only goes up. And I'm sitting there as a young early 20 something thinking like, well, I'm smarter than these guys. Like, I can do this too. And so I went out and I put all of my savings into buying rental properties, and I'm overspending, and I didn't know how
Wait,
to.
you had to put money down? I thought you didn't have to put money down
Yeah.
back then.
Well, yeah. So I did over leverage. I mean, and that was
Yeah,
so
for
with
sure.
yeah, so the main strategy that I use, not to go down too much of a rabbit hole, I'll keep it really quick, but I use a strategy called the Burr strategy, which is buy, renovate, refinance, rent, and repeat. And you're basically you're flipping houses to yourself. You're buying a fixer up or renovating it, and then you keep it as a rental property long term. And the idea here is that after you renovate it, you can refinance to pull all of your down payment back out of the property. So you have $0 actually tied up in that property, which it's a very effective strategy if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you don't, like I didn't, you end up way over leveraged. You end up with negative cash flow and all these bad things you don't want. And that is, of course, what happened to me in 2008. I ended up upside down on the properties. I had negative cash flow. I made every mistake you could possibly make, when I was in my 20s buying rental properties. Um, anyway, that's a very condensed lesson for anyone who's ever thought about buying rental properties, and trying to not have any of your own money tied up in them. But what was hard about that as well in 2008 is that not only did all of my investments totally crater, but my day job totally collapsed as well because,
Yeah.
I'm working with real estate investors. All of a sudden, nobody's investing in real estate anymore. Nobody's flipping houses. Nobody's doing BRRRR deals anymore. And that was my livelihood, was doing hard money loans. So that was hard. Um, I went and I got a totally unrelated job, well, partially unrelated job. I'm working for an e-commerce company that sold legal documents and other services for mom and pop landlords. And the only they say a door closes, a window opens. The only reason I got that job is because I did have direct experience myself as a landlord, as a mom and pop real estate investor. So, that's how kind of life works out, right? I mean,
Yep.
yeah, the world doesn't end. You move on, and it was great. I got to learn online marketing and how digital businesses work, which was great. And I was with that company for a long time, and then in 2016, a coworker of mine and I split off, and we started our own company called Spark Rental. And that too has been quite an evolution over time. When we first started it, we thought we were going to make this one-stop shop online property management software platform for landlords, which at the time didn't really exist, at least not in a good form. And we still do a little bit of that, but our focus has really shifted over the years, and we've focused more on education, selling courses, and more recently, we run an investment club, a membership group, for investing passively in real estate projects, as a big group of investors.
I think that happens a lot. And I don't know if people really know. I've read a lot of different business books and things like that. And it's very often that a company, the way the company starts is not the way the company ends, which makes sense. I mean, can you imagine if like, I don't know, if all Texas Instruments did was calculators kind of a thing, you know? It's like
Yeah.
if like or like if all HP did was, I don't know, typewriters, like you can't do that. So, anyways, okay, so we also heard there about lifestyle design, and this is a topic that we covered on this podcast many moons ago. Like I think episode 44 is the last time we talked about this. So I have been a little remiss in keeping this front of mind for the listeners here, but can you talk a little bit about what lifestyle design is, and then we'll get circle back and how real estate fits in.
Yeah, absolutely. So lifestyle design is one of those terms that some people find pompous, or it bothers some people. I really like lifestyle design. Whether you like that term or not, the premise is basically just bringing intentionality to every area of your life. Your work, of course, your career, but also your personal life, your romantic relationships, your family life, geographically where you live, what hours do you work, do you are you location independent? Are you time independent? All of those things, combine together to create an intentional life that is by your personal design, living the exact life that you individually want to be living. Because so many of us just kind of float, we drift downstream in life and just, yeah, I mean, I can't remember the exact statistics, but it's something like 2/3 of Americans live within a 50-mile radius of where they grew up. That's probably not because where they grew up is their perfect place to live in the entire world, right? I mean, it's just default, and that's too much of how we as people live. Is just by default. We kind of fall into careers. I talked earlier about how I fell into working for a hard money lender. And I happen to enjoy a lot of that work, but that doesn't mean that it was my perfect career in life, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's really about intentionality. And uh, I started getting more intentional with my life when my wife and I moved overseas almost a decade ago now. In 2015, we moved across the world to Abu Dhabi. That was it was an intentional decision to go have an adventure, move overseas for a little bit. Um, as for Abu Dhabi itself, that's just happened to be where we went to a job fair. My wife's an international school counselor, and so we went to a job fair for international educators. And within 24 hours, she had like 5 or 6 job offers from schools around the world, and we were most intrigued by the
Wow.
one in Abu Dhabi. And so we went, and we thought we were just going to take a 2-year sabbatical from our lives living in Baltimore,
Sure.
Maryland, where we're from. And so we rented our house out furnished for 2 years, and we're just gonna step right back into our lives after 2 years. And of course, that was a decade ago. We're still we're still overseas. Um, and we ended up selling off that house, and but yeah, I mean, we ended up just falling in love with expat life. We spent 4 years in Abu Dhabi, then we moved to Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, for 4 years. And more recently, we moved to Lima, Peru. We'll be here through June 2025, and then moving somewhere else, which we actually just decided a couple weeks ago that we wanted to move on, and we might move back to the States for a little bit just to reconnect with family. We might move to
Yeah.
Europe for a couple years. So, but we'll see.
Yep. Amazing. So, do you like speak all these different languages? Like, how does that work?
Not even a little bit. So the UAE, it's worth mentioning, UAE is bilingual English and Arabic. So at least in the two large cities in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, everybody speaks English. And all the road signs are in English and in Arabic. I mean,
Oh, that's
everything.
nice.
Yeah,
Whew.
even
And
government
menus,
forms. I mean,
menus
oh
are
yeah, menus 100%. In fact, often the menus are only in English and not in Arabic at all. So
interesting.
I might have learned like 5 words of Arabic the entire 4 years that we lived there. I mean,
Was it like bathroom, beer? No.
honestly, not even because I mean everyone spoke English, so it was more like just stylistically, it would just be fun to occasionally pick up a couple of words from Arabic that were commonplace over there, like wasta means like your connections to powerful people, basically, like, oh, that girl's got wasta, like she knows the royal family, that sort of stuff. um
Okay, interesting. So stuff where like there isn't really even an English word for it.
yeah, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
In Brazil, no, that was different. I mean, in Brasilia, where we were, nobody really spoke English. So my restaurant Portuguese got really good. I mean, I could read a menu in Portuguese perfectly,
nice.
but I was not at all conversational in Portuguese. My wife was almost conversational in Portuguese. So by the end of 4 years living there, I got to be kind of embarrassed that, people would ask me, "Oh, like how long have you been living in Brazil?" Expecting me to say like 4 months. And when I said four
Yeah,
years, they were like, "Oh, you don't speak any Portuguese." Like, so I got a little embarrassed by that. So when we moved to Peru, I took it more seriously to try to learn Spanish. Now, so at 43 though, it's really humbling trying to learn a new language. Like trying to learn Spanish in my 40s has been really humbling. I mean, I've been taking lessons. I still take lessons, not even conversational. I'm like almost conversational in Spanish now, but yeah, it's humbling.
yeah. So speaking of lifestyle design, I left my corporate job a little over a year ago now. And something that I really wanted to be able to do, and this could just be that I'm a lazy human being. I just wanted to wake up and like ease into the day. And that just sounds lazy, but it's like I wanted to wake up, have my tea. I wanted to do Duolingo to learn Spanish, and I wanted to like read a chapter of a book and then jump in and do stuff like like so I did that today, then I biked to the gym, and then now we're doing this recording, right? That's how I wanted my days to be, which I thought was interesting. At first, I even was like, yeah, and I'll work out around noon and I'll do this, I'll do that. Wait, I'm like, wait, Lauren, that's just like how your day goes while you have your work from home job, right? So I had to like even kind of at first I constructed almost the same day and I'm like, no, 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 like really, what would I want? But I was very good at I was really good at Spanish in high school. And like we went up to Spanish 5 and like it got to the point where like we were like memorizing poems and analyzing them in Spanish and it's kind of crazy. And then I went to Colombia last year and like I sucked bad. And I was like, "Oh no, like I've lost it." So I've been working on my Spanish for 15 minutes a day for 200 days. I will have you know.
Oh, I love the streak. That's great. The Duolingo Streak Society.
Yep, I am in it. I am in it. My friend is he married I went to Colombia for his wedding and he married my friend and she speaks Spanish and so he and I are on a we also have a pretty good little friend streak going on because we're both trying to learn.
There you
So
go.
so yeah,
Well,
anyways, so go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I read a study a couple years back that 90% of a language that you once knew but you feel like you've forgotten, 90% of it will come back to you within 7 days of full immersion. But like full immersion, where like you're
I
plopped
believe it.
down in like the middle of nowhere in the other country, like no one is speaking a word of English to you the entire time. But I thought that was kind of interesting. And that was sort of I did experience that a little bit firsthand going to France. I took French in middle school and high school,
Oh,
and now I can't
interesting.
remember a single word of it. But there was a friend of mine got married in France years ago, and I went back, and after a few days of being there, all kinds of French vocabulary and grammar were bubbling up from like the depths of my subconscious. That I mean, I thought it was all gone, but it did
Yeah.
it did bubble back up.
Well, what I do notice when I go into those situations, even when we go on a cruise every year and I end up in Mexico, it's like there is a switch in your brain where my brain at least can go from English to Spanish. And then when you start thinking in Spanish instead of thinking in English and translating everything, that's when
Yeah.
the magic really happens for me. But that can't by definition, sorry, Duolingo. Obviously, this is not sponsored by them or I'd be saying
Yeah.
nasty things. But if Duolingo can't make that happen in 15 minutes. You know, it just can't. I
No.
mean, I could probably, but like, I was talking to one of my contractors who they all speak Spanish, and I'm like, what should I do? They're like, you should listen to, they said Colombian music, because I guess it's like a little bit slower, and maybe that would help like that transition happen in my brain. But
You can always
my
watch
friend is
Spanish
like,
movies.
my friend's like, simply let's go back to Colombia and, stay at my parents' place and we'll just do that for a month. And I'm like, okay, cool. We got to lifestyle design my husband's life a little more to be able to do that.
Sounds like a solid plan to me, though.
For sure. Okay, so we talked about. I always like to start these by like double clicking a little bit on things that we heard in the bio because I feel like if there's like something crazy in people's like introductory bio there and like we just never talk about it, like there's going to be cognitive dissonance for listeners throughout the whole thing. So we covered that. We covered what lifestyle design is, but explain to me how you get from wanting a certain life to getting that life because I can already hear people like, "Oh, that's really great, Lauren. I too wish that I could go to the gym at 10 or whatever, but I can't do that because of XYZ or whatever." So how do you make this happen?
So there's there's a concept that I like called the five freedoms, as sort of a way, a lens of looking at this through. So the first freedom is just freedom from financial stress. Because if you're chewing your fingernails, lying awake at night, worrying about money, then you're never going to get anywhere else, right? So the first step is just getting control of your personal finances to the point where you have a budget that works, you're saving and investing money every month, and you feel stable financially, you feel secure financially. And that puts you in a mindset where you can even start thinking about the rest of it.
Yep.
So from there, you can start thinking about location freedom, being able to live and work from anywhere in the world. That's obviously a lot easier today than it was pre-pandemic. But I mean, I started telecommuting in 2008 and have been working remotely ever since. So, there are plenty of ways to work remotely, whether that's working for someone else as a telecommute job, whether it's starting your own business, whether it's doing freelance work and gig work that's remote. I mean, I do some freelance writing to supplement my business income and just as something that's fun on the side and that keeps me involved in the ever-changing world of personal finance. So location freedom is one of those. Time freedom is another one. Being able to control the hours that you work, and that's not just how many hours in a week that you work, but it's also which hours you work. Some people do their best work at
Yeah.
5 a.m., right? Others do their best work maybe after their kids go to bed at 7 at night or something. So you
Yeah,
know,
5
con
a.m. Amy. That ain't me. And how nice if anybody's time is 9 to 5, but like, what are the odds that those are the best hours for you, right?
Right. I mean, that's just like society's framework because it
Yeah.
happens to be a convenient way to structure the workday and the school day and so forth. But that's society's convenience. That's on their terms. Like, so you want
Yeah.
to start working on, what are your terms? Like, what's your ideal and intentional working hours? But
So
yeah,
five freedoms: financial,
well, so
location,
freedom from
time,
financial stress,
and
location
this
freedom, time freedom.
and you should work on these in this order. Is that the idea?
It doesn't necessarily have to be in that order.
Okay.
Although the
Okay.
first one, freedom from financial stress, I think that one does have to come first because if you're stressing about money, you can't think about anything else. So that is really a
Sure.
prerequisite for the rest of these. Um, and then time freedom and location freedom, they really go hand in hand next. You can, pick either one is more important to you. Um, but I'll give you one quick example of how time freedom can look. So I took a what I call a red month at one point, where I just crossed through an entire month of the calendar with a red magic marker and said I'm not available this month. And my wife and daughter and I went hiking in Patagonia in Argentina for a month, and it was awesome. It was great, and that's the kind of stuff you can do when you have time freedom. And in a normal week, I work probably more than the average employee does, but it's all on my own time and
Right.
it's out of my own choice. So time freedom, location freedom, work freedom, which is the ability to do your own ideal work. that's meaningful to you, that is, fits your purpose and your passions, because most of us don't, right? And that's a huge component of lifestyle design, is doing your own ideal work. Now, where a lot of people get tripped up is their ideal work pays less than their current job, right? Like, so people get the
Yeah.
golden handcuff where they're working this
Yeah.
kind of high stress, high octane day job, working longer hours than they want to, not spending as much time with their family as they want, all that stuff. Um,
Stress. I mean,
yeah,
I was in
yeah.
sales, like quotas, high pressure situations. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So, but then they get tied to it by that golden handcuff where they're earning
Hmm.
more than what their true ideal
Right.
work
And their
pays.
lifestyle is probably such that they can't just take that pay cut easily.
Well, I mean, they've elected that lifestyle, right? I mean,
Sure, of course. Yes.
so yeah, so they chose to move into the more expensive home, and they bought the
Yes.
fancier car,
Yep.
and they got in the habit of going out to fancy dinners all the time. And I'm not judging. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been there and done that with all of these things in my life.
Same.
Um, and to this day, I mean, I'm spoiled in my own ways. But that is really the problem that a lot of people face when they start thinking about work freedom and their ideal work is, they basically decide it's a non-starter because, I
Yeah.
spend $6,000 a month. My ideal work only pays $5,000 a month. So, where does that leave me? And what the framework that we encourage people to think about that in is that they don't actually need the fifth freedom, financial freedom or financial independence. They don't actually need financial independence, the ability to cover all of your living expenses with passive
Yeah.
income so that you
Right.
could retire if you want. You don't actually need that if you can switch to doing your ideal work and then just cover any shortfall
Right.
with passive income from investments.
So it's a
So
little bit coast FI-ish.
it's kind of post FI. I think the
No,
whole,
coast. Sorry, I said coast with a C.
oh, coast. Um, Sort of, but it's so Coast Fi, at least the way that I define it and the way that I talk about that is you have stopped saving and investing money every month, um, knowing that your current net worth or your current investment portfolio will grow on its own to reach the number, your target number by the time that you want to retire.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I
So
guess the reason I was thinking that was similar is like the gap was what you were saving, and now that's gone, and you're just doing this job just to pay your bills. But yeah, I can see the difference in what you're saying now.
So the difference in what I'm proposing is you quit your job and your current high stress job that you don't necessarily love head over heels, and you go and do your ideal work, and you're actually taking a little bit of money from your investments every month in the form of income to supplement your total income and afford your lifestyle that you want to be living.
Yep.
So it's a little past, on the spectrum of financial independence. It's a little past coast fi, where
Yeah.
you're
Because you
just
need to use what you have saved a little bit.
because you do, yeah, because you're taking some passive income from your investments. You're not selling off investments, but you are collecting some passive income from your investments to help supplement your lifestyle.
Yeah.
But that is a lot. It's a lot easier to get there than it is to reach full financial independence. If you have to cover, I'm just going to keep using the same numbers that I used a minute ago. If you have to cover $6,000 a month in living expenses, it's going to take you a long time to be able to build $6,000 a month in passive income streams. That takes, for most people, it takes decades, but at the very least, it takes many years to reach that.
Yep.
If you are just trying to reach a shortfall of $1,000 a month in passive income, that's not trivial, but it's a lot easier than trying to
Yeah.
cover the full 6,000,
Sure
right?
is.
That's something that you could do within a couple years potentially, or maybe even, in under a year, depending on where you are now,
Yeah.
and depending on what that shortfall is for you. For you, it may only be a few $100s a month that you're short and that you really need to cover. And maybe you can bridge some of that gap by scaling back your living expenses a little
Yep.
bit, right? Like
Yep.
maybe you don't have to go out to eat every week, and maybe when your current car dies, maybe you don't replace it with a brand new top of the line car. Maybe you drive something more modest, and in doing so, you can live on a more modest budget and start doing your ideal work, which will move the needle in your happiness a lot more than driving a fancier car, right?
Yes. Yes, I get it now.
Anyway, it was a long-winded answer, but so those
No, I love
that's
it. So that's
you
how that thing, the passive income to bridge the gap to get you to do the work that you want to do versus the work that you have to do, that for you has been real estate, but it doesn't have to be.
doesn't have
But
to be.
yeah,
Absolutely not. And I'm happy to share why I like real estate for that. But it doesn't have to be real estate. So anyway, just to summarize, you had asked because I spent a long time answering it was a long answer to a short question. Short question was how do you get to lifestyle design? Like how do you actually enact it? And the framework that I used was those five freedoms of, freedom from financial stress, time freedom, location freedom, work freedom, and then ultimately financial freedom. But that's kind of the cherry on top that becomes almost superfluous as you get the other four in place. So you had asked about, why real estate, because passive income streams can come from anything. I mean, it can come from a business that you run, it can come from dividends from your stock portfolio, it can come from royalties from, songs that you wrote or books that you wrote, right? Um, so why real estate? Why do I like real estate? First of all, I would say real estate should not be your entire portfolio, right? I mean, I love real estate. I mean, I've been in this industry for 2+ decades, and I still have only half of my net worth in real
mhm.
estate. The other half is mostly in stocks, index funds and ETFs. So just diversified passive stock investments. I like passive real estate investments, which is where almost all of the other half of my net worth is, for a couple of reasons. One, real estate is a more income oriented investment than stocks are.
Yeah.
And, so historically, around half of the returns from real estate come in the form of income, and the other half come in the form of appreciation and growth gains. Um, so that makes it easier to earn higher income yields and generate that passive income piece faster. So, my stock investments, they can kind of sit there on autopilot, with my robo advisor that just pulls money out of my checking account every week to put in my stock portfolio. That's going to grow long term. I'm not touching it. I'm not pulling any money out of it. I'm not depending on the dividends to live on. I'm not depending on the income from that, right? It's purely a growth investment in my portfolio. My real
Yep.
estate is more of a mix of income that I can rely on, and also a lot of growth as well. But it's easier to find these high yield income investments among passive real estate investments than it is to find those kinds of yields in stocks. And you make some sacrifices when you chase those in stocks as well that you don't necessarily make in real estate. And I'll give you one quick example that we invested in recently in our co-investing club, which is we have an investment club that meets every month and we vet these passive investments and we go into them together. But one that we did within the last month or two, it was a fund that is it's run by a small company. They flip land basically. They flip undeveloped land, and it's a very high margin, but it's a business model basically. It's almost as much of a, or it is as much of a business as it is an investment for them.
Because
So,
like they're clearing the land, they're surveying it, are they getting utilities run?
not even in most
Okay.
cases.
Okay.
It's less of a lift than that.
Okay.
So their biggest challenge is going on and they buy parcels of land for 35 to 60 cents on the dollar. And that takes work in itself to
Sure.
find. So, massive direct mail campaigns every month. I mean, thousands
Yeah.
upon thousands of letters going out every month.
Yeah.
They buy medium priced land parcels. So they're not competing with like the big like hedge funds or anything like that, but they're also not competing with, every every person who watched a webinar about land flipping
Hmm.
either and is
Yep.
buying
Yep.
land for like a few grand a
Couple
pop.
thousand. Yeah.
So they're buying in that like $25,000 to $250,000 range, that medium range for land. They'll buy large parcels and then they'll do what they call a minor subdivision, where they subdivide it up to five
Gotcha.
individual parcels from one. And the reason they do that is because they don't need zoning approval for that in the markets where they operate. So
Okay.
there's no risk of them not getting approved for subdividing. So they'll buy like a 50-acre lot, for example, and then they'll subdivide it into 5 10-acre lots. and then sell off those lots to individual home builders, basically people who want to
And
build
then
a
those
second
people
home.
parcel it off, and then no.
Well, I mean, it could be. So they might do like minor things like bulldozing a dirt road for access to the newly split up lots, but
Okay.
like they're not doing any heavy lift on like
Like
utilities
scraping
or
it or okay.
yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
they're not stripping the land or anything like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they have earned very high returns since inception. They earn typically in the low to mid 30% range on their investments, and they do. It's a high volume business, relatively small individual
Right.
purchases, but high returns on these high margin business. So this fund they pay 16% annualized returns every quarter, and it's like clockwork. So, you know, that's a pretty high return for a very stable income yield, right? I mean, it's hard to find
Yeah.
that somewhere else. So that's what's one sort of case study example of how you can pretty quickly build up passive income streams through passive real estate investments.
Right.
And
You're not saying you guys go do this land flipping. You're saying
no,
I
no, no,
invest in
no.
this land flipping business, right? And then I
No,
get
yeah. So
the
we
returns. Yeah.
we invested in their fund as
Yes,
as an
yes.
investment club.
You were clear on that. I just wanted to like just double click on it. That's
Well,
all.
yeah, and it's worth that's a distinction that's worth making because the average person is not familiar with that distinction. So active investing in real estate is when you're going out and you're buying properties yourself, like you're becoming a landlord or you're flipping houses.
Hmm.
Passive investing is when you are investing in other people's real estate projects and you're just writing a check, right?
And by the way, the IRS says when you're going out and buying properties, that's passive, which is wrong.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things about passive real estate investing is that the tax benefits of real estate, almost all of them pass through to you as a passive investor, where
yeah.
you're either a silent partner on like a partnership, or you are a limited partner in a syndication, or you're investing in a real estate equity fund. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to invest passively in real estate, and we can talk about those if you want. But all of those equity investments the tax benefits of real estate pass through to you, even if you're a passive investor in those. So that's a
Yeah.
that's a huge help.
And so that is how you're able to design your life is by getting those, for example, returns like that by investing in funds. So is there anything else you want to add, Brian, before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I could talk all day about passive real estate investing, but I don't want to bore anyone to death. Yeah, if you're interested, hit me up. Check out what we're doing. We love this stuff. We nerd out on it. So, yeah, every month we're looking at a different passive real estate investment, and they're all completely unique and different. That one happened to be this sort of niche land investing fund, but we invest in multifamily syndications. We partner with house flippers. I mean, we invest in private notes. They just pay like a steady interest rate every month. I mean, all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, we're all about diversification and investing small amounts across a lot of different types of projects and investments in a lot of different markets.
So that's sparkrental.com. Can you also let people know what your social media handles are?
Yeah, so just at Spark Rental. We're on all the major social media platforms. We have a particularly large presence on Facebook, where we have a couple of big Facebook groups. We've got like a 50,000 investor group for active investors and I don't know, 8,000, 9,000 investor group for passive investors. But yeah, so at Spark Rental, check us out.
All right, and guys, you can follow me on Twitter X at Adulting is Easy, Instagram Adulting is Easy, Real, YouTube at Adulting is Easy. If you like this episode, like I said earlier, you might also like episode 44, All the Ways You Can FI, or 77, Fire in Your 20s. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Brian and I have made adulting a little easier for you.